Sunday night, and Nicholas is waving a bottle of what look like stout at us. So anyway, welcome to episode 62 of the Malt Travel podcast. I think, as always, Nicholas is probably the only person drinking tonight because I've had a fairly dry weekend. The weather's been, I know it's been like you guys, the weather's been atrocious around here.
What's that going to do with supping?
And we had a run out to Newport today in Shropshire, and I mean the roads were literally underwater at parts. So
wow,
I didn't even stop for a drink. I tell you, I did go into the Titanic bod, which is quite a nice one, but there were 5 people behind the bar and none of them were serving, so I walked out. Which is first, I've not done that for a while. So they just all having a chat, just all like chatting, and there was 2 or 3 of us sat at the bar waiting. I went, oh, sorry.
That's mad.
So anyway, we're episode 62. So what we're going to do this one is something came up in our last episode 61, where we'd been kind of away for the summer, or certainly Bruce and I had, and over the summer there'd been a change in the UK's #1 beer. Although I have to say, reading the Sunday Times this morning, there was another claim that another certain black beer claims that they are the best-selling beer in the UK. Anyway, but so we might come to that in a minute. So come on, Nicholas, you better give it, as you are the only person drinking beer. What are you drinking this evening? Looked like a Great Newsom, was it?
Yeah, it's one of your birthday presents, Gem Stout.
Oh, very nice.
It's very nice. It just needs a bit of nitrogen in it just to give it that creamy head, which is probably the only decent thing about Guinness. Because I was watching a really interesting YouTube article documentary about Guinness the other day. Some bloke had tested it all, the hydrometer and all that sort of stuff, and was comparing it. And he said, literally, the taste has turned to nothing. It's very watery now. He says the only thing that actually gives it any flavour, any taste, is the nitrogen that's infused into it.
What's that, Nick?
I've been sort of suggested.
Guinness.
I can't remember which one it was, Bruce, but he really went into it in detail. And he basically said, you take all the gas out of it. He said the quality of the actual liquid now compared to what it was 20 years ago, because they're going for a younger market, they've taken some of the hops out of there. They're actually putting flavourings in now, extract and something else that is a bit ambiguous. In Guinness, yeah. And he made the point. He says it's now owned by Diageo, and all they're interested in is maximum profit for minimum input. He says they've cut the brewery down from 4,000 people down to 65 people brewing now. He said, and basically it's just all done. It's all done mechanically. He said there's no human interaction in it now. They're just knocking out a cheaper possible product and just mass selling it, which I've always sort of suggested. I don't want
to lose my house, so these are Nick's comments and nothing to do with me. But can I just make that abundantly clear? That these are Nick Hale's comments, nothing to do with me.
I would say that
the
article in the Sunday Times is actually justifying the £6 a pint for Guinness Zero, and there's quite. I don't know. It feels like a very interesting article. I'm sure it'll be lots of other papers this week. The Sunday Times, they are quite good at getting those exclusives, but there's quite a very detailed article about how they make it zero Guinness, and what they're claiming is that they brew it just like any other Guinness, and then they extract the alcohol. They don't just overboil it or water it down. They actually extract the alcohol using some quite technical methods, and therefore they claim it takes longer. And they also say because there's no alcohol in it, it's more likely to have bacteria in it. So actually they can't release it for 2 weeks. So it has to sit in the brewery for 2 weeks while they test it, to make sure there's no bacteria got in it, because otherwise it would go off. Because obviously the alcohol normally stops that as well. So anyway, interesting. So this one.
Yeah,
anyway.
we all know the most expensive part of a pint is actually the duty that you're paying on the alcohol content.
Well, it's 50p
so
a pint.
Something that doesn't contain any alcohol whatsoever.
Well, they're claiming it's 50p on a pint. The duty is 50p. And they're still saying that the actual production. But anyway, we're talking about lager tonight. Which has got I was writing in the kind of our prefab that we don't mention it, but we do mention it quite a lot, because we often mention it about the continental stuff, which isn't continental. But it has got a bit of a I guess an image, and when you read into it, it is very much about image. So we'll perhaps have a little chat about whether it is kind of the lager lout drink and wife beater, etc. And obviously, again, for those on YouTube, I've got the Hobgoblin advert on there, which you often see on big lorries running on the motorway. What's the matter, lager boy? Afraid you might taste something. Although I think these days Hobgoblin doesn't taste particularly welcoming these days.
No.
There's another story. So let's do a quick beer news and a quick catch up. We've got loads of stuff to catch up on. So, I mean, Bruce has been everywhere drinking over the last 3 weeks, so we can't keep up with Bruce. So I think I've got a couple of things from Bruce, a couple of things from myself. But I think we've got a few episodes worth of catch-ups we're gonna have to do. So again, we do also often slag off Green King. And on that vein about Bruce, we're not wanting to go down libel courts. We will sing their praises. So I don't know if you got this in your area, guys, but the first few of September, a big thing where they were running £2 pints. Recognizing that there was a cost of living crisis, or they probably got a lot of beer left over the summer, probably, and the summer's been so bad, so they were getting rid of their beer. So £2 pints, which is great. You can't really knock that. And I noticed that
in York, I did actually try. Didn't got my way to try because we went out last week, and I've not had one, so I was determined to get one. So the £2 pint in the Lendl cellars here was Amstel, which £2 was okay. So I did actually have one a day before it finished. But yeah, fair game to them, really.
And I actually drank one of their new beers actually on my little trip out of my birthday. And I was again, I've got to say, I was quite impressed with it. And I'll come back to that in a minute, because it's not something I would normally choose. In fact, at the time, I didn't know it was Green King until I kind of worked it through. And the other one here, just again, similar story. Again, if you're on YouTube, you can see this at the Bury St Edmunds Beer Festival, which was at the end of August. Green King actually had produced a special beer, a 15% strong ale. And they were selling nips and noggins. So a nip was £1.90 and a noggin was £1.50 at £2. So what's 150 ml? Is that like a fifth of a pint, isn't it? Something like that.
Yeah.
5 times whiskey cask, Suffolk. Wow. No tasters. So they are still brewing proper beers. So here we go. We always talk about Wetherspoons every week. So again, we'll be positive. But not if you pick this one up, this is going to be the biggest pub, isn't it? So they've had a thing, haven't they, building pubs next to stations. So this was announced, it opened a couple of weeks ago. So it's another one for us to tick off, perhaps. So Wetherspoons has just opened next to Waterloo, the Lion and Unicorn. And by all accounts, it is very much based on a pub that was on this site in the 1950s that was demolished. And very much a Festival Britain kind of style, so lots of glass and lots of steel. So it looks very interesting. It looks massive. It's cost, well, let me move our videos there, 2.8 million. So again, as we said, we did talk about Wetherspoons selling some pubs, but they continue to open pubs. And again, if nothing else, it'll mean that in central London you can get a decent cheap beer and cheap food. Especially
it's not cheap though. The beer's not cheap, nor is it cheap food. At St Pancras, fish and chips, I think, is $15.89 with that alcoholic drink. Which, quite frankly, you must be off your freaking head to fish and chips pay £16 for a
but if you go further down the road, though, it's probably more than that, isn't it? In some other places. And I don't
they're opening a new one at the Manchester Airport today. Have shared their plans. They're going to have the first bar at Manchester Airport as well.
That's right. Yeah.
I read an interview this week because bloke who owns Ryanair is saying there should be a 2-drink limit at the airports, hasn't there? And Tim Martin said, "Oh no, it's not us. It's not us. Only 35% of our sales are a beer." Which now, again, not lose roof over the head. But
I agree with that, because you don't see people pissed up in airport bars and lounges. You just don't. You don't see people in a few drinks, but you don't see people getting caned. The people getting caned have got bottles of vodka in the bloody bag. That's the ones who are
drinking their own duty free.
Drinking it on the plane.
They're up. I mean, you couldn't police it, could you? He said it should be a 2-part limit, but he said he'll introduce it. But no, you couldn't. He's police on an aeroplane, but not in an airport, isn't it? Really?
Anyway, let's move on. The other news, which again actually got in quite a few national, I think the Guardian on this initially, was this guy called Andy Morton. Andy Morton is a fairly mild-mannered chap from Sheffield, but he just drank his 50,000th beer. And this then certainly got me going down a rabbit hole and got into this whole thing about beer tickers, which again, now and then, I think, Nick, I've been out with you, we've been accused of being beer tickers. I don't think we probably technically say we are beer tickers. I used Untapped, which is fine. But this guy is one of the legendary beer tickers.
Yeah.
Alongside the Ale Finder General, Gary the Trolley. Apparently, he puts all the beer in bottles and takes it home with him because he doesn't want to drink it. So he takes like 50 little plastic bottles with him and Panda Pops, and he pours his beer into
Oh,
one
we
of
had
those.
that. Remember that guy in Wakefield, Bruce, when we went in the Labour Club? What's it called? The Red Shed.
Yes,
he did that, didn't he?
Yeah.
He was. I forgot about him. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was
Jingling
like
Geordie.
little,
Yeah.
Yeah. So apparently that's
quarter,
but then there's quite a lot of blurred rules around this because
quarter of a bottle. We just couldn't work out why you got into a pub and then.
Yeah, some tickers have a sip, some tickers have a third, and some tickers have a half or a pint, or some take it away. Now, Andy, he always has a half or a pint. He doesn't think sipping should be allowed. But then I've worked out that actually there's actually a film about these guys. There's actually quite a well-known film called The Beer Tickers Beyond the Ale, which you can still get on YouTube. And there's a whole documentary done by a guy called Phil Parkin. And actually, a lot of the guys that I talked about in the Guardian now and thing were there. Although I think, fortunately, Mick the Tick, who's done 80,000 beer, unfortunately, he died recently. So, sorry, no, it was Brian the Champ.
Probably sclerosis of the liver, was it?
Yeah. And then actually, this Andy Morton actually had his own beer brewed for him. So actually, Kelham Island, all the pubs in Kelham Island ran Morton's Milestone. And in fact, I'd come across this Dr. Morton's when last time I was in Bakewell. I had a pint on it. I didn't know where it was from. And actually, when you look closely, it's Abbeydale. So it's like a bit of it's like one little subarm of Abbeydale Brewery, Dr. Morton's, and they'd brewed him his own beer called the Morton's Milestone. But I then got into all of this and got into Scoopergen, which is a ticking website which ticks all this. And there is apparently every year produced in January the GOBS Guide, the Guild of British Beer Samplers, and that lists every single beer that is currently on the market in the UK, around about 45,000 apparently. It's not digital, it's paper, it's 606 pages. And if I go back, you can see on that picture there from the Guardian of Andy Morton, that's it there. It's kind of like a lever arch valve. Now, I've been trying to get one of these and it's impossible. It's you probably get the bloody, I don't know, Donald Trump's next, whereabouts than trying to get the GOBS Guide to beer. So we must keep a lookout for this. Now, I did think we should have this little check though, because it just says, "How do you spot a ticker in your pub?" So appears during the day. So I'm afraid that pub will be us. Arrives on a bus. Yeah, it's possibly us. Yeah. Arrives with a rucksack or a trolley. Well, okay. I normally have a rucksack with me. Brings Panda Pot bottles and a funnel. Studies the full range of cask beers for ordering. Drinks halves and make notes. So I'm afraid gents, we probably do. Pick most of those ones up. Anyway, there we go. So the whole point of this one then was this thing that, as obviously was mentioned, that Beer and Moretti had taken over Carling, which had been there for a long, long time, as being the UK's best-selling beer in the UK. As I say, interestingly, so many times they claim that, not now, but they claim that Guinness had done that a couple of years ago, kind of post-lockdown. I remember that stat that, what was it, every 10th drink in London was a pint of Guinness, wasn't it? Just after lockdown. And I think Guinness was one of those drinks that people were longing for when they came out of lockdown. So that's what we thought we'd do. We'd have a quick thought about lager. Lager, obviously, I guess has many forms, really. Very much, obviously, continental style, German style. Lager means that it should be a bottom fermenting beer, unlike like those beers we saw at Sam Smith's, where that was top fermenting. And of course, the key thing about lager means store. So the whole point of this beer was in that it was stored often in more colder climes, so especially kind of northern Germany, places like Denmark, and often would be stored underground or in caves, and that would kind of settle the beer, and therefore it came out finer, more golden. Also, there's probably less of the darker malts grown in kind of northern Central Europe, so you get much more the lighter malts. And in that kind of German, Austria, Czechoslovakia kind of area, that's where kind of lager kind of got its name. They do darker ones. They do dunkels, don't they? But that's kind of where it is. And lager is a form of beer maturation on yeast that you last for several weeks, if not months, at near freezing temperatures. After fermentation, before filtration and packing the beer, lager is employed, and that's kind of where it comes from, where you kind of store beers. Back in 1961, lager only accounted for 1% of beer sales. But by the end of as we move into the 70s, lager kind of became the drink. And I think we'll just have a check over that. As I mentioned, there's quite some good books on that. I've got a little book called The History of Lager, which is a really interesting read. Pete Brown also does quite a lot of. I think that's what Pete Brown did. I think he worked for Heineken, didn't he? He was an actual, a marketing guy for him. But in his book, he does quite a good chapter about lager as well. So I wouldn't say I never order a pint of lager. And Bruce has already confessed that he had a pint of Amstel recently. Nicholas, lager, where do you stand on it?
Indian takeaways, Indian restaurants. Kingfisher, my first choice. Cobra, if they don't have Kingfisher. So every month go for an Indian, and that's what I normally enjoy. And I used to like the Italians, but once again, the Italian lagers, Peroni, and then Beer di Moretti. Obviously, we're independent, and they, concentrated and took pride in their products, and then they were bought out, and it's just all mass produced now. So the taste and the flavour and the character is completely lost, really, compared to what they used to be like.
So the Peroni in Italy is still really quite nice. You get that red bottle Peroni, it's quite nice. It's a very different drink to over here. I think Moretti over here is a bloody horrible drink now. But what they do, I've noticed a lot of restaurants now have Moretti on. They sell it by these reinforced bags, and they have like a temporary little, like a mini bar with a pump, don't they? And for restaurants, it seems a very easy way to have draft beer on that requires very little management. You just have to keep these kind of bags chilled. One finishes, you literally screw the pump into it and away they go. They've got draft beer. So I'm sure that's been a big driver. I know.
Yeah, it's a profiting again, Bruce, you see. It's a cheap product to produce now. Even to transport now, it's very cheap. It's cheaper to transport something in a plastic bag than it is in a barrel or a cask. And then dispensing it, it's fresh beer. They're not having to let it, settle and sit around for a long time, and maximum profit on it. And because it's a continental lager, people are prepared to pay £6-7 for a pint of it.
Yeah. They've certainly realised that the market, as people levitate towards eating out instead of drinking, that I suppose they've seen a need for it. Someone very cleverly, and people are getting draft beer, and it's just awful stuff out of their bags. We go to a lovely Neapolitan pizza place in York, and they've got it on. I mean, to be fair to them, they have a collection of rare Italian craft beers and lagers as well. But what's amazing now is that when you go to the pub, I mean, me and Christy went down to Fox on here on Tuesday night, and I was looking about, and Lag was outselling ale by about 3 pints to 1, really. That's right, pleasant plastic beer. But what I found
the biggest after the beer festival at Earl Mutton Royal Oak, Bruce, which is obviously one of my locals. Steve runs a beer festival twice a year, and the spot's absolutely rammed. And even then, you go in the beer garden, and about 50% of people sat in the beer garden all drinking lager. Why would you go to a beer festival when you're drinking lager?
A lot of people are scared to get a pint because they might not like it. I mean, that's the trouble, isn't it?
Yeah.
I must admit as well. I mean, I went out last night, and also as you get older, I'm finding now that my old constitution, which used to be like iron, is no longer that way. And I went out last night actually to the Nag's Head at Askham Brine, where the food was very good. I had a sweet chili chicken, but I'm thinking, if I have that, and then I have a couple of 2 or 3 pints of Osset on top of that, I'm never going to have to lose. So I ended up drinking Prava lager last night, because that's the other thing as well, I suppose. It is a bit gentle on the old constitution. But I must admit, I went to Knaresborough to the Cross Keys on Wednesday. Osset beers everywhere. No one keeps it as well as they do. The beer in that pub is absolutely superb at the Cross Keys in Knaresborough. If you're passing it at all, it's like the best part of Osset you'll get anywhere. But when I was having a wee, I noticed that Osset now on the one Sunday every month do a brewery tour and tasting for £9.95. That's not bad, is it? So we've got to quite an interesting little place and see the brewery. It must be fair old size now. For tenner, that we should try and do that one day. It'd be worth $2, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I think we've touched on a few things, haven't we? That I think you're right. Often you do find even real ale pubs. When we mentioned a few times on this podcast, you find majority of people drinking lager. I remember that pair, Nick, we were with at Kirby Lonsdale in their brewery tap, where they were. I think me and you tried 9 beers in the thirds, and they were just very happy quaffing Madry, even though they love the brewery tap. I guess the challenge is, have you ever had a bad pint of lager? I think you do, but you can get bad pints of lager. It's normally the badly poured, aren't they? You get some, novice on the bar, and you get like a head of foam. But I guess that's the key. It's consistency. And if you are forking out your hard-earned 550, I've got to say, again, probably more so this last few months, I've had some really bad cask beers, and occasionally I've gone back, but as always, most of the time you just lump it and say, well, you know what, I'll drink this. It tastes like it's on the turn, but I'm not.
Nearly 5 is down the tubes, isn't it? That's the trouble. Nearly 5 is down the tubes.
I can't be asked bothering to go through it. So you'd actually think probably lager was quite new, but it's not actually. It's been in England for quite a while, actually. And I think particularly back in the 1840s, by all accounts, obviously the Grand Tour, when young gentlemen went off around Europe and they came back with that lighter beer. So it was, and one or two breweries tried it. What it really needs is that kind of cooling. So it really kind of began to boom in the late 1800s when we had refrigeration, when that first came in, where you can actually cool beer down. And I think that's right. You can't warm lager is horrible, isn't it? You've got to drink it.
Tenants in Scotland are claiming that they were the first ones to produce it in 1885.
Yeah.
But then Wrexham Brewery say they were producing it in 1882. And they were the first to produce draft lager on draft.
Yeah.
So unusual that it's a Scottish brewery and a Welsh brewery. But they make a claim that they were the first ones to basically brew and dispense it in any sort of quantity.
And of course, the other one was World War II, because obviously, all the blokes who went across to fight, and ladies went across to fight in Europe, they couldn't get any IPA in Belgium or in Germany, so they came back with a little bit of a taste of kind of that more European beer. And because of that, Heineken and Carlsberg were already exporting, I think, almost half of what they were producing to the UK by 1950. The big problem for both of those breweries, Heineken and Carlsberg, was they couldn't get into the tied house system. Quite rightly, Bass Charrington and everybody just refused to let them in. They could see what was happening, couldn't they? So, of course, what they did was, that's when they started kind of brewery buying. So, Carlsberg particularly found, well, if they're not letting us in their pubs, do you know what we're going to do? We're just going to bloody buy their pubs. So that's when they started buying up British breweries, not because they wanted the breweries, they wanted their pubs to get their product in their pubs. So apparently they began doing some cooperative agreements. So apparently Carlin first worked with Whitbread, but even that was very much on Whitbread's favour. So that's what they began to do. In the 1960s, again, it was still seen as a bit of a feminine drink because they were trying to package it towards females, and particularly because, of course, supermarkets were arising as well. And apparently the next big thing then was television, because television by 1960, 60% of British houses had a television, and that had twofold. That was one thing was that you were drinking at home and not necessarily going to the pub, because you had something to do now. So they sat there looking at a black wall. And of course, the other one was branding. Obviously, when ITV and that came in, beer branding became the big thing, and that's when they began to say. I read today actually in the 1960s, all the big breweries didn't do adverts. They all clubbed together. They paid their money in together, and they ran kind of British beer adverts. British beer is wholesome. The best long drink in the world, British beer. So they didn't actually do any individual marketing, and that's where kind of Heineken and Carlsberg said, "Sod that, we're going to come in and we're going to do our own marketing." And then the big thing was Harp Lager was the first on draft in 1964. So that's slightly Nick's Wrexham Lager. And then Carlin went into draft in 1965. And at that point, it became the man's drink. And that's what you drank in the pub, pints of lager. So quite interesting, really, about how that kind of developed. So, right, let's just quick pause. And then
look, a real life lager outlook. A real life lager out.
We'll just do a bit beery catch up, and then we'll have a break, and then I've got a little test then for these pair, because I've got some slides lined up with lagers, and they're going to guess where they're actually produced, and whether they are continental or not. So I think I'm already going to get. He's throwing his answers around. I'm going to get the best view from a bar for this year. So I think, unfortunately, Bruce, when you went to Corfu, I don't think you had time to get here. So
No,
when
that,
we
I
go
love that.
through, this is the Sky View bar, which, as you can see
Yeah.
there, overlooks Corfu Airport runway. So you can
I
sit
love
there
that.
drinking your beers, watching, and it's quite nice because there's a nice lagoon as well. The sea's on your left hand for those on the picture. The sea's on your left. There's a lagoon in front, and the airport. Actually, there's EasyJet just touching down there. And not only that, but this bar actually also sold Corfu beer, proper beer. So that was very, very nice. Although I did, again, the beers, you could only have so many, and then you had to go into the Uzos. I had a little mini tour actually last time. I think I mentioned on the last podcast, I was up to Yorkshire. Again, unfortunately, shifts and things meant that I couldn't catch up with Bruce, but I did catch up with Nick. So it was a typical lovely August weekend, or was it early September maybe? So it was pissing it down, wasn't it? So anyway, we went to Scarbados. Very nice that Scarbados. Nick had it Friday night. Thank you very much for fundamental birthday treats.
Yeah.
And actually, I decided I'd go in a couple of pubs that I hadn't been in, or that I would go in. I don't know whether you guys have been in the Frigate, but I would strongly recommend it. So the Frigate is the Frigate is opposite the Joke Shop. If anybody's been to Scarborough, knows where the Joke Shop is, on the bottom of Sands End, or what it's called.
I've walked by it loads of times on the way to the Leeds Arms, but I've never thought of going.
Yeah, so the Frigate apparently was a fish and chip shop. Clayton's.
Clayton's.
So now it's a very nice little micro bar, and they had three very nice beers on. They had Daleside, they had Great Newsom, and they had Skinner's, which is a bit weird. I come all the way from Cornwall, but it was very nice. They had loads of ciders as well, very nice ciders. Very nice little fire in there. Very amenable lady behind the bar who looked after us. So yeah, really, so definitely a new one for me, but definitely recommend that one. Did then go up to
I thought Skinner's had closed down.
Well, it may be being brewed by somebody. Went up to Leeds Arms, Bruce. I've not been in there probably for 20 years. Hasn't changed very much. Managed to get in that front window seat. Limited beer, actually. I think it was Timothy Taylor's, or there was another beer on, which was all right, actually.
I've never lost it on as well.
Yeah. No, I don't think it was this time. I'll have to check what it was. But that was very nice. So that was great. And then my other find was, and I don't know whether you've come across this, there's actually a bar now in the market hall. So Scarborough's got a lovely market hall, public market. It kind of was very much on its last legs. But as in a lot of cases, it's been a bit titivated. There still are some stalls in there. There's a very good couple of really good greengrocers. The Fishman didn't seem to be operating, but there's a butcher's. And they put there's a nice cafe, and they've actually built a little bar. And they actually have wall top beers on. And again, quite amazingly, they had wall top gold on, and then they also had wall top marmalade porter, which is quite nice. You wouldn't kind of expect them, so I had to have half of each. But again, if you're in Scarborough, and if the weather wasn't great, which it was, and you want a nice indoor space, recommend getting yourself into the market hall. And the little bar in there was really, really great. Very nice. All good.
It seems Skinner's did close, but it said we're back. We've been on a little hiatus, but we are back and ready to fill pumps and pints across the land. So yeah, must have had some reinvestment and
the other place in Scarborough, again, I think we've talked about it on here, but I've never been in, is the Craft. And the Craft has been around for a couple of years now. The Craft is opposite the St. Joseph's, not St. Joseph's, Joseph's, we'll call it theatre, isn't it?
And it's Technical Dreamcoat.
Technical Dreamcoat. And again, very nice little craft bar. 3 or 4 hand pumps on. See, there's a very nice pint of beer. You're literally 2 minutes from the station, which again, you often forget what a lovely station Scarborough is. There didn't seem to be any bar on Scarborough. Is it all finished now on Scarborough Station? Because wasn't there a head of steam there at one point?
Yeah, very short-lived.
Oh, right.
It used to be a Revival Records, that spot, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah, I think it did, yeah. So again, can recommend it. Really nice welcome. Again, a nice little mix in there. Got to say again, quite a few of the guys in there were drinking lagers. They do some of those more continental lagers, but that was very good. And then ended up, of course, in Brasscastle, which was very, very nice. And I had a good. In fact, got there a bit early. Probably stayed there a little bit too long. And then I think we managed up to the Peterson Square, didn't we, Nick? I think that was about it then. And then we were in Florio, which is very, very nice. And again, I would say while I was in there, something that I wouldn't normally go for, but Popper Bower, which is Brasscastle's, I guess their autumn beer, really. red ale, and with cardamom, cinnamon, cloves, chilies, and black pepper. And I've got to say, it was very nice. It's probably something that I probably wouldn't normally go for, but it was very nice. Okay, Bruce, we've got about 3 minutes left. So you've done I've just kind of collected here. You had a little bit of a kind of a what we call it, East Midlands travel, didn't you? You went to Stamford.
Well, yeah,
Peterborough.
Yes.
Anything?
Yeah, it was excellent. I'd say we started in Peterborough. Much I know we've called Wetherspoons. I have to say, Peterborough, the Bees and Good Beer Guide are very strong about. We didn't have time to go, so en route there to Stamford. So we passed the Wetherspoons, which is an old draper's shop. It's called Draper's Arms. And I have to say, it was fantastic. They've done a lovely job of the renovation. It was very low key for Wetherspoons. You can see just one tiny poster in the window. Great range of beers on, though. Big spot of local beers. And I have to say, for Wetherspoons, it was really clean. But what made the difference was the staff. The staff were absolutely lovely. Tend to be older ladies, but they were really friendly. Someone dirty plate down, they were taking it away. There wasn't the sticky carpet. The tables were clean. And you can see the array of beers was amazing, really. You know, because you're in Citra country there, they had a usual Citra, the local brew there, two of theirs on.
Titanic plum porter, I can see.
Yeah, that was everything there. But I'd say as the Wetherspoons ago, this was definitely one of the best of them, really. It left some original boots. And then we went on to Stamford, which was perfectly preserved Georgian town. And again, the star turn there, the Toby Norris stunning pub there. 7 rooms over 3 floors, loads of real beer. We did go to the George Hotel there, which was because the first hanging sign in the country. It's still there. As the Leeds room, the York room, rather, the London room, where lots of relatives stayed. They were there. And then he had a bit of a touristy trap day in London with some former colleagues.
Right, just pause London. We'll take a break and we'll come back, and you can kick us off at London in part 2. So just have a short break, guys. I'll be back in part 2.
See you soon. Bye.
Yep.